everybody. Welcome to Daily Distinction on a Tuesday. Glad that you are here. What's going on with you? Hope everything is good. And things are crazy here in Las Vegas. In fact, right now they really are. Let me see if I can pull it up here. I should have done this before we got started, but see here. 2021, we had a major news story in Las Vegas today. Let me see if I can share that out with you. Chrome tab, there we go. Take a look, and the big news story in Las Vegas today is that CES, which stands for the Consumer Electronics Show. It is the biggest show of the year in Las Vegas. It's the biggest meeting of the year in Vegas, and it has canceled because of the pandemic. How about that? And the meeting is not until next year. Notice it says CES 2021. That's an interesting thing there. What normally happens in Vegas each year won't be in Vegas after all. So it's CES in January of next year has been, or I shouldn't say it's been canceled, but they've certainly canceled the part of it that's here in Las Vegas. It is now going to be a virtual show, and it just amplifies that things are certainly changing in terms of how we communicate and in terms of how we connect with customers and in terms of how we do everything that we do in terms of interaction and communication. So that's going to be the topic today. What happens when everything changes in terms of how we communicate, and it's a little challenging out there. So, hey, Brian, great to see you. Here we go, Tuesday afternoon. So glad you're here. Weldon, are you home from vacation now, Weldon? Are you back in the saddle? Or I noticed you were on vacation before. Ted, good Tuesday to you, sir. Thank you very much for being here. I appreciate it. Charles, as always, great to see you, my friend. Thank you so much. They just canceled the conference out there in September. And SEMA, oh my gosh, SEMA is the Aftermarkets Automotive Conference, and Weldon, I was one of the keynotes for Napa for their meeting, and they only do their meeting once every 5 years, and they have 20 some odd thousand people, and that's something that has gone away as well. Yeah, Darcy, it's huge. It is literally the biggest trade show of the year in. Probably be a rush between Orlando and maybe New York City with the Javits, but I mean, you would have to say that Vegas is one of the trade show capitals of the world, maybe the trade show capital of the world. And for your biggest trade show 6-7 months from now to go ahead and announce that they're not going to meet, you're exactly right. It is absolutely. It's an enormous story. I get it. Well, as both Tammy and I have tested positive for COVID, we're joking about this being the bunker. We're hunkered down in our bunker here, but it's incredible. It is absolutely incredible. So the question is, these changing times are changing how we meet and how we communicate. And I realize that it's easy to think of this as just being a topic for speakers or a topic for meeting planners or a topic for those in the meetings industry. But I want to suggest it really does apply to all of us. And here's the reason why. If you're in sales, you're going to have to think about how you make sales calls in the future. If you are a manager, how do you get your team together? Did you see that there are several companies, Google and others, that have already announced to their employees, plan on working at home or working remotely for another year. And it wasn't that long ago that a bunch of speakers and meeting planners were on a conference call, and we were saying, well, we think it's going to come back in the fall. Man, were we wrong. If CES is canceling their late January meeting, it ain't coming back in the fall, right? I mean, it is a crazy, crazy time. And so these changing times, as we see, are creating a lot of difference. And so what I want to suggest to you is this isn't just for meeting planners. This isn't just for speakers. This is for all of us in terms of we got to rethink how we are connecting with our teams and how we are connecting with our customers and our prospects. Delene, yeah, I mean, city conferences, town hall meetings. You know, how does the city council get together and have open discussion and be open for our citizens, right? I mean, it changes all that. And Ted, man, I wouldn't bet on it, right? I mean, I sure hope so. I sure hope it's in that case. And Vegas is, Vegas is open. I'm a little reticent about saying this, but I think part of what's happening in Las Vegas now is that, for example, every Sunday here locally in Vegas, they come on and they talk about how backed up Interstate 15 is on Sundays. Interstate 15 is the interstate that runs from Vegas to California. So if you come to Vegas from San Diego, if you come to Vegas from Los Angeles, you're coming on the 15. I always think it's interesting that west here, where they call it on the 15. When I lived in Los Angeles, you got on the 405 or the 5. Back in Indiana, we never said you get on the 65. You get on I-65. You get on 65. But here it's always the. It's just weird. Anyway, so they talk about how traffic is backed up on the 15. And the really interesting thing is, I think part of what is happening is that people could come here and catch the virus, and then they drive back home, and they're not in the Nevada statistics, they're in the California statistics because that's where they get the test. So it's just crazy. Well, then I think you make a great point. I mean, if we go another year, things are going to be different for a long, long time. Hey, Charles, thanks for asking. Tammy still has, a little bit of issue, but it's certainly nothing like it was. And, it's going to take a while to recover, but her sense of smell is back. Her sense of taste is back. So she is on the road to recovery. Hey, Eric, good to see you. Great picture of John Mellencamp there with you. Seymour, of all places, broadcast City Council live on Facebook. Isn't that wild? Small. By the way, in case you don't know, and Eric knows this so well, is there with John in the picture, and Seymour is the small town that John Mellencamp is from. So if you're familiar with his hit Small Town, that literally is about Seymour. So it is the small town of small towns. Mike, many of our support businesses have already announced they're working at home through 2020. Crazy. Oh, man. And Darcy Fishers, Indiana did too as well. Yeah. Hey, Janice in Houston, we're planning virtual events at work through at least February. Well, Janice, I would be happy to provide you with my virtual keynote price too. But yeah, I mean, it changes everything. Well, like in our business, if you think about it, where our business was based on, monthly income based on what my keynote speaking fee was. Boy, our world has changed. I mean, it's just crazy. So a lot of this is going on. So how do we present? How do we make the most of that time that we have, whether it's a virtual event or whatever, whether it could be anything from a city council meeting that we talked about. It could be a sales call that you're making. It might be you get your team together, and all that is going on while we hear that people are suffering from Zoom fatigue. Now, as someone with a spouse who's dealt with COVID, I want to tell you, you would rather have Zoom fatigue than COVID. I hate it when I hear these pictures or hear these commentaries or read these stories that people are suffering from Zoom fatigue. I don't think they're suffering. They're inconvenienced. They might be bored, but they're hardly suffering. We have negated the term suffering. I mean, people dealing with an illness are suffering. If you're tired of Zoom, you're not suffering. But I want to suggest that these people are not dealing with Zoom fatigue. Zoom fatigue doesn't exist. You may disagree. I'm going to tell you why I believe that. I don't believe Zoom fatigue exists. You don't walk into your family room, point at your television screen, and say, I'm suffering from television fatigue. Because the TV is just the tool that delivers the programming to you. You might not like a particular show. Gosh, I've gotten bored with Empire. It used to be good. Now I'm bored with Empire. You don't blame the television because now you're bored with Empire. I hate watching the news. It is so depressing. You don't blame the television set. You blame CNN. All right. So when people say they are zoomed out or they're suffering from Zoom fatigue, it is like blaming your television set instead of CNN for negative news. Zoom is just the tool by which we transmit our meetings or information or whatever. So it's not that they're suffering from Zoom fatigue. It's that they're tired of the way that we're doing our meetings. They're tired of it. They're exhausted by talking heads. Talking heads is a television term. And there you go. Hey, Laura, great to see you. It's bad presentation fatigue. It's boring meeting fatigue. It is just grind it out fatigue. Yeah, I would rather have Zoom fatigue than COVID. I appreciate that, Janice. Yeah, I mean, Zoom board meetings are difficult, but you're not suffering from anything. And the point is, the boredom isn't with Zoom. The boredom is with bad presentations. The boredom is with what we call talking heads. Now, in television, when I was a TV news anchor in Indianapolis, part of what we went through in our training and our coaching was to try to avoid long segments of talking heads. Now, a talking head is like what I am right now. I'm sitting static in a room and I'm talking to you and talking to the camera. What makes this a little bit different than the typical TV talking head is that I can bring in Mike's quote. Yeah, we're tired of the new normal, Mike. That's part of it. Yes, I agree. Now, see, I can bring in Mike's quote, and Mike, thank you for a great quote. But now we're having a dialogue that you typically don't have on television, right? You don't see quotes from people as they come in as they're on television. So even though this is a talking head show, it's not just because you can participate. You can participate in it. But what we are trained to avoid at all costs on television is for somebody to just sit and pontificate for a long period of time. You know why? Because we don't want that. We're not engaged with that. See, even when I post Mike's comment, it helps the show because you might be thinking the same thing. Or you might be thinking something else, and you can get on here and post another comment, right? Because we've got lots of comments from lots of different people. So that's part of it. But one of the most important parts is to think about how we can change how we meet. And one of the things that's absolutely fascinating to me is that I have gotten paid to give speeches my whole life, literally for half of my life. And I'm realizing now that the skills that are important for meetings is no longer the skill I shouldn't say no longer, but it isn't as much the skill to stand on a stage and give a speech as it is the skills that I learned in my career as a broadcaster. Because what we're doing now is not speaking. What we're doing now is broadcasting. So let's say you are a meeting professional. As a meeting planner, meeting professional, as a speaker, we thought of these big stages. It was like Cirque du Soleil, right? We'd have these big stages and great screens and slides going on and all of that. Even if you had a small meeting without all of that, you had coffee out in the hallway and you were in someplace different. Perhaps you might be in a hotel. People got to travel a little bit. There were things that were going on. Now we're just looking at our our monitors or our tablets. Hey, we're even attending meetings on our phones. And so if all it is just a head, yap, 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 that doesn't work in the rules of broadcasting. Broadcasters think small. Meeting planners think large. So a broadcaster would think in terms of a very small, this little square. And how do I fill this square with something that will engage and will connect? And the other thing broadcasters do is they think differently than meeting planners. I've watched TV for about 4 years. Yeah, well, and see, but Sonia, you're not mad at your television set. You're mad about what the programming is in terms of how they deliver the information, right? That set by Samsung or Sony or LG or whoever, that didn't do that. It's what's coming down the funnel. It's what's the programming. Yeah, exactly. Burning down the house. Talking heads. Good sound. Rainer, we're going to get to that. Yep, you bet. One of the things that we know from broadcasting is they'll forgive a fuzzy picture, but they won't forgive bad sound. First reason people tune out is bad sound. But here's the first step. You got to think in terms of these three aspects. Number one is variety. For example, one of the ways I try to shake it up here is occasionally we'll have guests that's come on. You know, we've had everybody from Joe Bonsall with the Oak Ridge Boys to Dana Williams with Diamond Rio to Larry Winget. We've had, you know, my pal Glenn Morshower from the TV show 24 and The Resident. So, I mean, we've tried to shake that up. Laura has been a guest here before, right? So we've tried to shake that up a little bit so it's not the same thing every day. I try to change the background, see what's on the slides, all that kind of thing. So we want to think in terms of variety. But as a meeting goes, part of what we have to do is, if you think about how a meeting went, somebody would give a report. That report would be maybe 30 minutes. And you would see on the slide every word that person was saying. There wasn't any variety. Think in terms of how television is programmed. And they have what's called a format clock. And the format clock means at the top of the hour, the show starts, and then in about 7 minutes, we're going to have commercials. And then we're going to be back on. Have you been binging any of your old favorite sitcoms here during the pandemic? Tammy and I have binged. We watched every episode of The Office. For some reason, I was never into The Office when it was online. What a fabulous show. It's good the last 2 seasons. It's incredible the first 7 when Steve Carell is on. But it always amazed me because I always thought of it as a half-hour show, and then you watch when it pops up, and it's a 20-minute show. Why is it that way? Because there were commercials and station identification and little plug-in network promos and things like that. So the 30-minute show became really it's really a 20-minute show. Why? Because there were breaks. They did segments. They did short segments. So what we need to think about is, as we plan a meeting, is not how long can my audience set before they have to have a bio break, which is what we did a lot with meetings, right? How long can they set before they got to get up and go to the bathroom? And rather, thinking like a broadcaster, how do we create these short, powerful segments that give us variety? And the other thing that's important is movement. Movement. When a consultant was helping me do live shots in television news, he taught me about movement and why movement is so important. There's no reason to send it to a reporter in the field if all the reporter does is stand and say exactly what they could have said in the studio. The reason that you're in the field is to move and to show, to use the power of television to show. But even for a speaker just talking to an audience, movement is so important. All right. I mean, that's why speakers typically now don't stand behind the lectern and give a 45-minute, hour-long keynote presentation standing behind the lectern. Well, they do. They put on the wireless mic. They might even put on the Countryman, which is that mic that, you know, like Garth Brooks, that you see that, you know, and get movement into the program. Really, really important. But it's one of the things about virtual meetings that we've kind of eliminated. Everybody just sits and they're in this little square and there's no movement. So For those of you, and I know we have a few, but for those of you that are speakers, for example, one of the things is that if you have a signature story that you tell, like I tell the Taxi Terry story, that's kind of a signature story that's in every speech for groups that haven't heard me before. Well, one of the things that I'm doing in my virtual presentations is, it reminds me of an incredible story. Let me take you to a live audience where I shared this story. So you insert that segment into your presentation and you hear the audience and you see the audience, and now you kind of feel like you're at a meeting as it come back. And now I talk to you, but I was watching the Chicago Cubs Cincinnati Reds game last night, and they piped in crowd noise. And at first, when I very first turned it on, I thought, boy, that's kind of weird. But as the game progressed, it made me feel like I was watching regular season baseball. I thought it helped the announcers sound better because there was background noise. Maybe for part of a presentation, you want to layer in some background music underneath, very low, very soft, but it's incredible how that influences how we feel about the presentation when we hear that. Cheryl, that's kind of, I love not having commercials. However, I will suggest that one of the challenges, thanks, Weldon, I appreciate that. One of the challenges that I'm hearing a lot from meeting planners, particularly of associations, but it works in corporations as well, where you've had sponsors for your event. And how did you utilize the sponsors at an event? Well, they might have had a branded coffee cup, or they might have had that they could hand out. How do you do that in virtual? Well, there's a couple of ways, but one of the things that you could do is to insert a short 30-second commercial for your sponsor between speakers. So now it gives them something that, or you might let them have, but you want to make it short. How many meetings have you been to where they have to give the sponsor 10 minutes on the program and it just puts everybody to sleep? With this type of format, you could let them run one of their own produced, exciting, better commercials, maybe say a few words. By the way, so many ideas on this and so much that we can do. But here's the critical point, just like in sales. Think of the customer. Think of the customer. When it comes to virtual, when it comes to video, what you have to remember is what your customer has been trained from the time they were children is how television is structured and presented. That's your competition. For many meetings I've spoken to with Volkswagen, for example, are just off the hook. They are so big and so amazing. And my great friend Jason Bradshaw does such an extraordinary job putting those events together. Just absolutely incredible. And in part, they have to. You know why? Because if you own a Volkswagen dealership, you might also own a Toyota dealership. And Toyota's meetings are fantastic. And you don't want this dealer called dealer principals in that field, this dealer principal that's attended a Toyota meeting, then to come to a Volkswagen meeting and go, man, it just wasn't I guess Volkswagen isn't as big a deal as Toyota. Yeah, they are. So you have to have a meeting that says that, right? So they competed against each other. Now, so that's how that customer got trained. They went to a Toyota meeting and it was fantastic. So Volkswagen tried to top that and that was fantastic. So now they go back and Toyota right? It's the whole competitive thing. When it comes to this, a virtual meeting or a live stream, your viewer, your customer has been trained since they were children by how television is presented. Sesame Street didn't sit there and say, now we're going to learn how to count. One, repeat after me, one, right? Well, they had the count. They had a character. They had, when you think about how news is presented, it's not just one person sitting and reading for 30 minutes. You have an anchor that anchors the broadcast. They are what holds the broadcast in place. But the anchor will talk about a story. Then you might see some video of that story. The anchor throws it to a reporter in the field. The anchor says, now it's time for weather, which is another segment, another thing. Now we throw it to somebody else who is our weather expert. They even show you the seal of approval, right? So the expertise is qualified. And then they present their topic. And that's usually about 6-7 minutes, maybe for weather at most. And then they come back. Now you go to sports. There's a very segmented approach. That's what we need in meetings today, is thinking of the customer, the viewer. Yeah, there you go. Pre-roll sponsor spots. That's exactly what we're talking about, Weldon. Pre-roll sponsor spots. If your CEO, for example, is speaking at your meeting, don't have them speak from the office. Have them speak from, if I was having a meeting for Kentucky Fried Chicken, the last thing I would want to do is put the CEO behind his desk in his office or in a studio. Shoot it with him sitting at a table at one of your franchisees, right? And then put that video inside your meeting to captivate how people watch and look and learn. There is so much to this in terms of movement, how you move. Quick thing, you don't move front to back, you move side to side. Movement front and back is not nearly as powerful on a small screen as the movement side by side. How you use it. There's so much about this. Format clocks, the technology, how you present to a camera as opposed to how you present to an audience. There are so many details. And we've had a lot of requests in terms of, could we get more information about that? So just want you to know, we are creating a course on how you do this called Post-Pandemic Events. And it's going to talk about how do you create these broadcaster style events that will eliminate a significant degree of this Zoom fatigue and Zoom gloom that people are having out there. We have not opened it up yet for registration, but we are taking the waiting list because we know this thing's it's just such an important topic. But if you would like to learn more and get on our list, go to postpandemicevents.com and sign up. There's some information there for you already. And the course is going to start very, very soon. We're going to open the cart later this week. I'll have more on that for you later on. But it's such a critical topic. So go to postpandemicevents.com. You can see there how you can learn more about what we're talking about. Because look, none of us want to bore our listeners. Whether the listener is a single customer, like how do you do in real estate? How do you do a Zoom meeting with a customer and make it exciting? And if they are looking at your property, let's say Tammy and I were going to buy a house in Hawaii. Can't travel to Hawaii right now. Well, I mean, you can, but you got to sit for 2 weeks in a hotel before you do anything, and you're not going to do that. So one realtor is going to show us a home, and then another realtor might show us another home. So it's not only going to be the home upon which we make our decision, that's a significant part, but how does the realtor show it? How does the realtor display it? They better know this to be able to get there. If you're having a meeting with your team and you want to keep your team as engaged as they are if you're working together, how do you deliver that? These are all critical questions. So that's why we're doing this. I'll have some more information for you on that as we proceed, but please check out postpandemicevents.com. Hey, before I go, got to make sure I remind you too that the Ultimate Business Summit is coming up. It's August 13th and 14th. When you register for the Ultimate Business Summit, we had a bunch yesterday, by the way. We're excited. A lot of people are signing up, and I hope you do too. When you register for the Ultimate Business Summit, please use the coupon code SCOTT. It gets you $100 off. The customary fee is $197 for general registration and $497 for the VIP. Knock $100 off of both those. $97. It's under $100 to attend the Ultimate Business Summit. VIP goes down to $397, and with that, you get video of all the summit. You get, holy cow, you get a transcript of the summit. You get extra Zoom calls. You get a session the night before the summit starts. You get a VIP lunch with Simon Bailey. Just tons of stuff. Absolutely cool. So, you like the site, Cheryl? Thanks. I appreciate that. You bet. Hey, Kathy, thank you for that. I appreciate it. And Weldon, you hit the nail on the head. The presentation matters. So we're going to do all we can to help you be better presenters. Hey, that's all for today. Thank you for watching. I'll look forward to talking to you again tomorrow. Please check out postpandemicevents.com. Check out ultimatebusinesssummit.com. And I'll look forward to talking to you again tomorrow on the next edition of Daily Distinction.